Welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be focusing on writing the equation of best fit for a line given data or a graph, and we're going to make prediction based on the given data using that equation of best fit. Again, we want to show mastery in class by scoring at least an 80% on an exit ticket. Hopefully you have the notes in front of you. If you don't, take out a separate sheet of paper so you can take them. If you are borrowing a graphing calculator from the school, or if you have a sibling or someone who has one at home, I also suggest you get one. If you don't, please make sure you're following along because you're still going to be expected to be able to do this tomorrow in class. Now, on the note sheet, it's really nice because the directions are all down the left side, but I want to make sure we show you how we're doing this. So, our first one, we need to know, is the trend linear or quadratic, the equation, and then we have to find the value of y. We could take graph paper and we can plot it, but the nice thing about our graphing calculator is it does it for us. So I'm going to go to stat. On our calculator, it's a button that just says stat, and I'm going to hit edit. This takes me to a table, and I want to put my numbers in. L1 is going to be my x, so I'm going to put that to remind me, L1, and y is going to be L2. So I'm going to just put my numbers in, hit enter each time. And then I'm going to scroll over and I'm going to put my y values in. Now, the one thing we need to make sure when we do this is that our plots are on so that we can see these points. If we look at the top of y equals, it says stat plot in blue, so I'm going to hit second stat plot. My plot 1 is off, so I want to turn it on. I'm going to hit enter and hit enter again. Don't worry about messing with anything underneath it. That stays as it is. So now I'm going to hit zoom, and I'm going to hit stat. This unit is all about statistics. When we're talking about graphing lines of best fit, equations of best fit, it's all about statistics. So I'm going to hit zoom stat. That's just going to take me to my points that I plotted. Well, if I look, I have 4 points, and they're in a pretty straight line, so my trend is linear. Now, to be able to find what the equation is, we don't have to do point slope and slope formula. I'm just going to go and I'm going to hit stat again because we're still using those points and calculate. In this case, we're focusing on number 4 and number 5. Number 4 says linreg and number 5 says quadreg. Linreg means linear, quadreg means quadratic. Well, we said this one was linear, so I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to keep L1 and L2 as my list. Where it says store reg equation, this step's important. It's not mandatory, but it'll make your life a little easier. This is saying, where do you want to store your equation once you get it? Well, I'm going to hit vars. I'm going to go over to y vars, and I want function. I'm just going to hit enter. Well, I want to store it in y1, and it's there. Now I'm going to hit calculate. If you look at your screen, that's now your equation. It gives you your A, it gives you your B. So my equation now, y equals, and if I look, A is 2, so my slope is 2, and my B is -1. If I hit y equals now, because we told it to store it in -1, it's now stored, or in y1, it's now stored in y1. So now the question asks, what's the value of y when x equals 8? You can take x equals 8 and plug it into the equation, or on your calculator you have a table. So I'm going to hit second graph and get my table. Well, I want x is equal to 8, so I'm going to scroll down where x is equal to 8. If I look, y is equal to 15. Now, if I were to plug it in, it's still going to work. 2 times 8 gives me 16 minus 1, and 16 minus 1 gives me 15. So it will still work if you plug it in. The nice thing is the calculator is just a way to double check. Let's try it. So if we look at number 2 again, we want to know, is it linear or quadratic, the equation, and the value of y when x is 5. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go back to y equals and I'm going to clear my equation. We don't want that equation anymore. So now I'm going to go to stat and I'm going to edit. Here's where I need you to really make sure you're paying attention. When you go to clear your table, you scroll up to where it says L2 and you hit clear. Do not hit delete. Delete will get rid of the whole list. And we don't want the whole list to disappear. We just want what we put in there to disappear. So now, again, x is going to be my L1, y is going to be L2, and I'm just going to put my numbers in, -3, -2, -1, 0, and 1, -1, -4, -5, -4, -1. Now, the stat plot is already turned on because we turned it on last time. So I'm just going to hit, again, zoom, and we're going to zoom stat. Well, if I look, all my points are in a curve. That's telling me this is a quadratic equation. And you always want to start by looking at your curve because that tells you what type of equation you need to figure out. So again, because we're looking at our table, we want to go to stat, and we're going to calculate it. In this case, because it's quadratic, we're going to go to quadreg. It's not a line anymore. It's not that straight linear line, so quadreg. Again, leave the L1 and L2 the same, the frequency. We still want to store it in y1, so I'm going to go over to vars, yvars, function in y1. And again, if you forget to store it in y1, it's not wrong. You just have to write your equation down on your paper, and then you can type it into y1. But it'll still work the same way. When we calculate, again, it gives me my a, my b, and my c. So my equation, y equals a is 1x squared, b is 2, and c is 4. And all I did was copy that right from the calculator. A is 1, b is 2, and c is -4. If we double check, it's in y1. And if you double check your graph, it's going to hit either all or almost all of our points because it's our equation of best fit. Now, when it comes to quadratics, you'll also hear it called the curve of best fit because, well, the line curves. Now, I want to know when x is 5, what is y? So again, I'm going to hit second graph, go to my table. Well, if x is 5, if I scroll down, y is 31. And if you were to plug it in, it would still get you the same answer. So now, if we look at example 3, again, I want to make sure to go back to y equals, clear out what's in there. We're going to go to stat and edit. We're going to put our tables in. And again, you want to make sure that you clear the table, not delete the table. So I'm going to hit clear, enter, clear L1, and make sure you're putting your numbers in. And please, as you're going through, double check that your numbers are correct, because if you type an incorrect number in here, the calculator will still calculate it correctly. It'll just be based off your new numbers instead of the correct numbers in the problem. Again, I'm going to go to zoom and zoom stat, which is 9, and it's quadratic again. So now to find my quadratic equation, I'm going back to stat, and I want to calculate this time. We said it's quadratic, so it's going to be quadreg. Keep L1 and L2 the same. I want to store it, so again, vars, scroll over to yvars, function y1, and then calculate. Now, if we look, there's some pretty ugly decimals, and that's okay. You're allowed to have decimals in an equation. Because my b is rounded to the 10th, well, it ends at the 10th, I'm going to just round them all to the 10th. So my equation becomes y equals 0.7 x squared minus 0.4x plus 0.2. And again, we're just pulling them right from the calculator. We just rounded them. If I look in y equals, ooh, I apologize for the focus there. It shows my equation. So now I'm going to hit graph. And it doesn't touch every single point, and that's because of the decimals, but it touches almost every single point, and that's when we talk about the equation of best fit and the curve of best fit. It gets close to all the points. Now, in this case, it says when y is 25. If I look down my y column, there is no, and I'll zoom in so you guys can see, there is no 25. I have 23, and then I have 32. So x has to be somewhere between 6 or 7. Now, we can plug it in for y and solve it. I'm not worried about that. The big thing you need to keep in mind is it's somewhere between 6 and 7. So now the last one, I'm going to clear my y equals. I'm going to go to stat, and I want to edit my table. So again, I'm going to go up, and I'm going to clear, not delete, L2. And I want to clear, not delete, L1. So now I'm going to put my numbers in. 1, 0, -1, and -3. Go over to L2. 1, -1, -3, -5. Okay. We're now going to go zoom stat again so we can see. Well, these points, although they're a little curved, they don't look quadratic. They look linear. They're in a straight line. Oh, and I hit the buttons as I was writing. So now we're going to go back to stat, and we want to calculate it. We're not doing quadratics, we're doing linear. So we're going to hit linreg. We want to store it. So again, hit your vars button next to clear. Go to yvars, function, and y1. Again, we get decimals, but that's okay. Decimals aren't wrong. So my equation just becomes y equals 1.5x minus 0.9. And all I did was round my decimals. You don't have to write every single decimal point out. Now if I go back into y equals, well, my equation is there. So now I'm going to go to my table. We said x is -10, so I'm going to scroll up till I get to -10. And I end up with -15.74. That's my y value. This is a lot on the calculator, and I understand that. So hopefully you were doing it with the calculator in front of you. We're going to spend all day in class tomorrow making sure that we know and understand how to use the calculator. I'll use my document camera again to make sure you guys are able to follow along, and we can get all these buttons and questions cleared up. Make sure you bring your notes and any questions you have tomorrow, and I look forward to seeing you then.